To bring your new wife back to your hometown to show off, only to find your ex-wife, the one you've hated for 5 years, carrying your ailing mother to the hospital on her back. The truth about the woman who supposedly ruined you is about to bring you to your knees. He became a titan of industry, fueled by the humiliation of being abandoned when he had nothing. He returned to his roots to flaunt his success, but what awaited him wasn't admiration. It was a slap to his conscience. Maya Hayes, the woman he'd branded a gold-digging thief, was now on the verge of collapse, carrying his mother through the blistering heat. 5 years of silence, 5 years of wearing a scarlet letter to raise a child in the shadows. She had stood aside from his glory to bear all his shame. In this life, who was the real betrayer? The Tennessee sun in June wasn't just hot. It was a physical weight. It pressed down on the cracked asphalt of the county road, making the air shimmer with heat. From a distance, the road looked like it was covered in pools of water, a cruel mirage in the suffocating humidity. But up close, it was just baking asphalt and dust. The Rolls-Royce Cullinan, a behemoth of black steel and chrome, glided through this sweltering landscape. It looked as alien and obscene here as a spaceship landed in a forgotten pasture, a monster from another world that had wandered into this poor, rural corner of Appalachia. Inside, the climate control was working overtime, pumping out a dry, sterile cold. Jackson Blackwood, or Jax as the world knew him, tightened his grip on the leather-wrapped steering wheel. His hands were immaculate, his nails perfectly manicured. On his wrist, a Patek Philippe watch gleamed, a timepiece worth more than every house on this entire road combined. Jax hated coming back here, especially at this time of year, but his mother's increasingly insistent calls about wanting to see her new daughter-in-law before she closed her eyes for good had become impossible to ignore. "Jax, darling, is the road always this dreadful?" Tiffany Vanderbilt, seated beside him, fanned herself with a small paper fan, a pointless gesture against the Arctic blast from the vents aimed directly at her face. Her voice was a practiced, delicate purr, but it couldn't hide the sharp edge of her annoyance. Tiffany was a socialite in the truest sense of the word, porcelain skin, ruby red lips, and a wardrobe of designer labels. She was the woman Jax had chosen to fill the role of Mrs. Blackwood, the queen to his corporate empire. Theirs was a marriage of dynasties, a meticulously calculated merger of old money and new, ruthless power. "It's my home, Tiffany." "Try to bear it," Jax replied, his voice a low, clipped baritone. He didn't look at her. His eyes were fixed on the dirt road they were now turning onto, the red clay kicking up a cloud of dust behind them. His mind was drifting, pulled back to a ghost he had tried to exorcise for half a decade. 5 years. 5 years since that woman had thrown a signed divorce decree in his face, her parting words accusing him of being a poor, ambitionless failure. She had taken the 10 taels of gold, no. He had to translate it for his new life. The $50,000 in heirloom savings bonds, the last tangible asset his family possessed, and had vanished without a trace. That humiliation was the rocket fuel that had propelled him to the billionaire's stratosphere. He hated her. It was a pure, cold hatred, preserved in the brine of his wounded pride. Suddenly, Jax slammed on the brakes. The massive vehicle screeched to a halt, and Tiffany shrieked as her seatbelt locked, digging into her chest. "What in the world, Jax? You nearly sent my face through the windshield." Jax didn't hear her. His eyes narrowed, peering through the dust-caked glass. About 30 feet ahead, a figure was staggering under the merciless midday sun. A woman. She was so thin that her old, faded chambray shirt seemed to float around her body. Strapped to her back was an elderly woman with hair as white as cotton, her head lolling against the younger woman's shoulder, frail arms hanging limp at her sides. The woman carrying her took heavy, labored steps, her worn-out flip-flops sinking into the hot, sandy shoulder of the road. With every step, her shoulders trembled, and sweat soaked through the back of her shirt, revealing the sharp, blue-green lines of veins along her neck. Jax felt his heart skip a beat. That silhouette, even thinner, even more broken down, he'd recognize it in an instant. "Maya," he breathed, his voice trembling with a disbelief he didn't recognize in himself. He shoved the car door open and stumbled out. The heat rising from the ground hit him like a physical blow, making him dizzy for a moment. He scrambled forward, ignoring Tiffany's indignant calls from inside the car. "Maya! Maya Hayes!" The woman stopped. She turned around slowly, her face pale and gaunt under the brim of a tattered straw hat. Her eyes were sunken with exhaustion, but they were still a piercing, dark brown, holding a resilience that was almost cold. When she saw Jax, those eyes widened for a fraction of a second before the shutters came down again, her expression becoming as placid as if she were looking at a complete stranger. "Maya, what are you doing here? Why are you carrying my mother?" Jax's gaze dropped to the elderly woman on her back. It was her, Carol Blackwood, his mother. She was wheezing, her eyes shut tight, her lips a pale, bluish color from a raging fever. The hatred that had been simmering in Jax for 5 years was instantly replaced by a different kind of fury. "What's wrong with my mother? Why are you with her? What game are you playing now?" Maya didn't answer right away. She shifted her weight, trying to adjust his mother to keep her from slipping. Her legs were trembling slightly from the strain. She looked up at Jax, her chapped lips parting. She fell. "Her fever is dangerously high. The town clinic is closed for lunch. I have to get her to the county hospital." "Why didn't you call a car? Why are you carrying her in this heat?" Jax roared, his hand shooting out to grab Maya's thin arm. Maya looked down at his hand, then up at the opulent Rolls-Royce idling behind him. A faint, humorless smile touched her lips. "The local car service won't take a semi-conscious old woman." "And a taxi? You think this is New York City, Jax? You have to walk to the main highway to even hope to catch one." Just then, Tiffany stepped out of the car, shielding her face from the sun with a fashion magazine, tottering precariously on her stiletto heels. "Jax, what is going on? Who is this woman? And what is that awful smell?" Tiffany looked at Maya with an expression one might reserve for a pile of garbage, waving a dismissive hand in the air around her. Maya ignored her completely. Her eyes were locked on Jax, her voice quiet but as sharp as steel. "Get out of my way. I have to get her to the hospital now. She can't wait." "Let me," Jax grunted, trying to push Maya's hands away to take his mother. But Maya took a step back, a strange, fierce light in her eyes. "Your car is too expensive. The leather seats are too pristine. My mother is covered in sweat and dust. If we dirty your billionaire mobile, I could never afford to pay for the cleaning." Jax froze. Her words were a dry, stinging slap across his face. The wealth he was so proud of, the very symbol of his victory over his past, suddenly felt useless and pathetically absurd. "Maya, don't be stubborn. Get in the damn car!" he snarled, his voice cracking with a mixture of worry for his mother and rage at the woman in front of him. Maya looked at the wheezing Carol, then into Jax's bloodshot eyes. She said nothing more, just silently moved toward the car door. Jax quickly opened the rear door. A wave of sweat, Bengay, and road dust washed into the car's perfectly climate-controlled interior, clashing with the subtle scent of French perfume. Tiffany, standing nearby, opened her mouth to protest, but one look at Jax's thunderous expression made her snap it shut, her face darkening with resentment. Jax helped ease his mother onto the back seat. Maya turned to walk away, but Jax grabbed her wrist, his grip like a vice. "You're getting in, too. I have a lot of questions for you." Maya looked at him without a trace of fear. "I have to get home. My son is waiting for me." "Son." Jax froze, his mind reeling as a wild theory exploded in his brain. "Get in," he commanded, leaving no room for argument. He pushed her into the passenger seat and slammed the door. The Rolls-Royce's engine roared to life, and the car sped away in a cloud of red dust, leaving the quiet country road empty again under the relentless, unforgiving sun. The Rolls-Royce skidded to a stop under the faded portico of the Hollow Creek County General Hospital. Jax leaped out, yanking open the rear door and scooping his mother's frighteningly light body from the seat. He ran, a frantic, desperate sprint, his bespoke suit jacket now stained with his mother's sweat and the red Tennessee dust. Tiffany stumbled after him on her stilettos, the sharp clicks echoing unnervingly on the worn linoleum floor. Maya followed last, not running, but with a deliberate, urgent pace, her eyes fixed on the back of the man carrying the woman she had cared for like her own. Inside, the air was thick with the sterile, chemical smell of antiseptic, cold and heavy. "Doctor! I need a doctor! Now!" Jax bellowed, his voice echoing in the small, quiet waiting room. A team of nurses rushed out with a gurney. Carol was whisked away into an emergency room, the swinging doors flapping shut, separating the world of the living from the world of the dying with a panel of frosted glass. Jax leaned against the wall, gasping for breath, his chest heaving. For 5 years, he had been consumed by numbers, by billion-dollar acquisitions and hostile takeovers. It was only now, feeling the bird-like fragility of his mother in his arms, that he realized how little she was. Just a handful of brittle bones beneath a worn cotton dress. What is she still doing here? Tiffany's voice, sharp and unwelcome, cut through the silence. She stood at a careful distance from Maya, her face a mask of disgust. "Jax, let me call Kenji. He can arrange a helicopter to Vanderbilt Medical in Nashville. This place is filthy." "Shut up!" Jax snapped, his voice dangerously low. Tiffany flinched, her lips trembling, but she didn't dare argue. Jax turned his gaze to Maya. She stood perfectly still, her hands clasped in front of her, her eyes locked on the closed doors of the emergency room. Her presence here was the greatest paradox Jax had ever encountered. "Why?" he asked, stepping closer, his voice a low growl. "5 years ago, you took the money and ran. My mother told me she saw you leave with another man after cleaning out our family's entire life savings. So why are you here now, playing the saint?" Maya didn't look at him. A small, humorless smile touched her lips, a fleeting expression of pure derision. "What your mother told you is what happened then. You only ever believe what you want to believe, Jax." The ER doors swung open, and a tired-looking, middle-aged doctor stepped out. His face was etched with fatigue, but his eyes brightened slightly when he saw Maya. "Maya, you again? What happened to Carol this time?" Jax froze. The doctor's casual question was like a bucket of ice water thrown in his arrogant face. "Doctor, I'm Carol Blackwood's son. How is my mother?" Jax stepped forward, his tone infused with the authority of a man used to giving orders. The doctor squinted at Jax, looking him up and down before letting out a short, cold huff. "Well, what do you know? Carol Blackwood actually has a son. For the last 5 years, I thought her only family was this daughter-in-law here." He gestured toward Maya. "Her chart is as thick as a phone book, full of visits for her arthritis and recurring infections, but the signature on the next of kin line is always the same, Maya Hayes." Jax felt a hot flush creep up his neck. He stood there, speechless. 5 years. A signature from a ghost. "What are you talking about, doctor?" Tiffany interjected, her voice dripping with venom. "This woman is obviously a con artist. She's probably running some kind of long con to get her hands on his money. This is all just an act." The doctor turned to Tiffany, his eyes filled with contempt. "An act? An act that lasts 5 years? An act where you carry an old woman on your back for miles in 100-degree heat? Where you skip meals to buy her the best medicine her insurance won't cover? Where you sit by her bed and massage her legs for hours when the arthritis gets bad? Lady, if this is an act, I suggest you sign her up for acting lessons in Hollywood, because she's the best I've ever seen." He then turned back to Maya, his voice softening. "Maya, Mrs. Blackwood has a severe joint effusion complicated by a viral fever. You got her here just in time. Any later and she could have gone into septic shock. She's stable now, on an IV drip. You can go to the front desk and handle the admitting paperwork." "Thank you, doctor," Maya said, her voice a soft whisper that somehow pierced Jax's heart. She turned to walk toward the reception desk. Jax shot out a hand and grabbed her shoulder. "Stop. I'll pay." Maya shrugged his hand off, her eyes as cold as polished steel. "The hospital bills for my mother are something I can handle. Mr. Blackwood should save his money for his wedding. My mother, not yours." Jax roared, a toxic mix of shame and rage making him lose control. For the past 5 years, who was the one calling her mom? Who stayed up all night when her joints ached with every shift in the weather? Was it you, or was it me? Maya shot back, her voice terrifyingly calm. "You have money, Jax. But do you even know her favorite food? What smells she can't stand? You don't know anything, do you? Maya walked away, leaving Jax rooted to the spot in the middle of the hospital corridor. Tiffany rushed to his side, clinging to his arm, her voice a syrupy, sweet poison. "Jax, darling, don't listen to her lies. She obviously used that $50,000 to win your mother over. She's just trying to claw her way back in now that she knows you're a billionaire." Jax didn't answer. He looked down at his own hands, the hands that had built the mighty Blackwood Holdings empire, yet had no idea how much his own mother had suffered for 5 long years. $50,000, he thought. If Maya had $50,000, why was she so gaunt? Why were her flip-flops worn down to the nub? A few minutes later, Maya returned, tucking a receipt into the pocket of her worn shirt. She looked at Jax. Her voice clipped. "She's awake. You can go in and see her. I have to go home. Cody is waiting." "Who's Cody?" Jax asked, his voice shaking. Maya paused, her breath catching for a split second. She kept her back to him, her thin silhouette casting a long shadow on the polished hospital floor. "My son." Just 2 words, and then she walked away, quickly. Jax started to follow, but his feet felt like they were encased in lead. Her son, 5 years. How old was the child, and why had he just remembered something? He stumbled into his mother's room. Carol was lying on the bed, her face gaunt, her eyes staring listlessly at the ceiling. When she saw Jax, there was no joy, no tears of relief, just a long, weary sigh. "You're back. Mom, why did you lie to me?" Jax knelt by the bedside, taking her frail hand in his. "Why did you tell me Maya abandoned us? Why did the doctor say she's been taking care of you for 5 years? Carol closed her eyes, 2 ancient tears rolling down her wrinkled cheeks. She didn't answer right away, her breathing ragged. Don't ask any more, son. You're getting married soon. Just focus on Tiffany." Outside in the hallway, Tiffany was on the phone with her mother, Eleanor. Her voice was a low, anxious hiss. "Mother, his ex-wife is back." She showed up carrying the old woman to the hospital. "Jax is starting to have doubts. You need to handle this." In the stuffy hospital room, Jax looked from his mother to the window, where Maya's shadow had long since disappeared. He could feel a storm gathering on the horizon, and this time he suspected all the money and power of Blackwood Holdings wouldn't be able to stop it. The old scar in his heart hadn't healed. It was being ripped open, bleeding fresh, and hurting more than ever before. The night in the hospital was thick with the smell of antiseptic, a scent that clung to the back of Jax's throat. He sat on a hard plastic chair in the deserted hallway, his head leaned back against the cool, peeling paint of the wall. The chill he felt had nothing to do with the overworked air conditioner. It radiated from the pit of his stomach, a cold knot of confusion and dread. In the room, his mother was asleep, aided by a dose of painkillers. Tiffany had retreated to the most luxurious hotel in the nearest city hours ago, after a litany of complaints about the provincial hospital's lack of amenities. It was just Jax, alone with the ghosts he had tried to bury for 5 long years. 5 years ago, Blackwood Holdings wasn't a name that made Wall Street tremble. It was a floundering tech startup, gasping for air on the brink of bankruptcy. Debt collectors were circling like vultures. Partners were pulling their funding, and employees were abandoning ship. Jax had become a cornered animal, fueled by cheap whiskey and a series of desperate, failed negotiations. He remembered that rainy afternoon with perfect, painful clarity. He had come home to their cramped, rented apartment on the outskirts of Nashville. The first thing that hit him wasn't the smell of dinner, but the hollow emptiness of the space. The closet door was open, showing only his own worn-out clothes. The small wooden box on top of the wardrobe was empty. The $50,000 in heirloom savings bonds, the last vestige of his family's history, his final desperate hope to pay off a crucial debt, was gone. The divorce papers were laid out neatly on the small kitchen table. Maya's signature was crisp and dry, untouched by a single tear. Beneath the papers was a short, brutal note. "I can't live like this anymore. I need a life for myself. Don't look for me," he had screamed. He had smashed a chair against the wall. And when his mother, Carol, had driven in from the countryside, She'd confirmed his worst fears through a flood of tears. She swore she had seen Maya, with her own 2 eyes, sneaking out with the bonds, getting into a strange car with an unknown man. The pain of betrayal had morphed into a powerful, toxic fuel. It burned away his grief and ignited a ferocious ambition. He would show her. He would become so successful that her betrayal would look like the stupidest mistake of her life. He met Tiffany. Her family had money, connections, power. Her mother, Eleanor Vanderbilt, laid out the terms: marry Tiffany, and Blackwood Holdings would be saved. He'd sold himself to that marriage to spite the world, to prove to Maya Hayes that she had thrown away a king. But what he had seen today, the raw, undeniable reality of Maya's existence, had shattered that narrative. If Maya had taken $50,000, a sum that could have set her up comfortably in a small town or funded a new start in a city, why did she look so broken? Her hands were rough and calloused from hard labor. Her shirt was so old the collar was frayed. And those flip-flops, worn down to the sole. A woman with money didn't live like that. And most importantly, Cody. Maya had said it was her son. How old was the child? A chilling memory surfaced. A rainy night, long before the end, when they were happy, he'd whispered in her ear, "If we ever have a son, let's name him Cody. It means helper, a comforting presence." The name felt like a key turning in a lock he didn't know existed. Jax pulled out his phone, his fingers trembling slightly as he dialed the number for Kenji, his corporate lawyer, and the only person who knew the full story of his past. "Kenji here." The voice on the other end was sharp and alert, even at this late hour. "Kenji, I need you to run a full background check on Maya Hayes, currently living in Hollow Creek, Tennessee," Jax said, his voice low and gravelly. "I want to know everything. What she's been doing for the past 5 years, who she's been living with, and everything about her son." "Maya? Your ex-wife? Jax, what the hell is going on?" "Your wedding is in 2 weeks. Just do it, Kenji, as fast as you can." Jax hung up, offering no explanation. He didn't want theories. He needed facts. The truth. The first rays of dawn were painting the sky a pale, hazy gray when Jax left the hospital. Dew clung to the Queen Anne's lace, lining the country road. He didn't call his driver or Tiffany. The Rolls-Royce glided silently through the awakening town, the purr of its engine a stark contrast to the storm raging inside him. He drove back to Hollow Creek. He needed answers that weren't filtered through his mother's tears or Tiffany's calculated manipulations. The village was stirring to life, with the crowing of roosters and the smell of wood smoke. Jax parked at the edge of the town square and walked toward the small farmer's market. He was wearing a simple black t-shirt, but the aura of a man who commanded a billion-dollar empire was unmistakable, drawing curious glances from the locals. Among the stalls of dewy vegetables and freshly caught river fish, Jax froze. A few feet away, Maya was squatting by a fruit stand, carefully selecting a few ripe bananas. She was wearing a simple, faded brown sundress, her thin arms exposed to the morning sun. Next to her stood a little boy. He was about 5 years old, with a messy mop of dark hair, completely absorbed in licking a cheap popsicle. He wore a faded Superman t-shirt, and his shorts were rolled up, revealing sturdy little legs. Suddenly, the boy darted out into the path, chasing a yellow butterfly. He wasn't looking, and tripped on a loose stone, tumbling right in front of Jax's expensive sneakers. The popsicle fell, landing in the dirt. The boy didn't cry. He scrambled up, dusted off his hands, and looked up. Jax's world tilted on its axis. It felt like a bolt of lightning had shot down his spine, leaving him paralyzed. The boy's face was his own, in miniature. The same high forehead, the same straight nose, and especially the eyes, large, dark, almond-shaped eyes with long lashes that curved up slightly at the corners. An exact replica of the ones staring back at him from the old black-and-white photos his mother kept in a shoebox. "Hey, you okay, kid?" Jax knelt, his voice so shaky he barely recognized it. The boy looked at him without fear, his lip jutting out in a stubborn pout that was achingly familiar. "I'm okay, but my popsicle is ruined." Are you going to buy me a new one?" "Dad." The word was on the tip of Jax's tongue. His heart was hammering against his ribs so hard it hurt. "Cody!" "What did I tell you about running off?" Maya rushed over, her face a mask of panic. When she saw Jax kneeling in front of her son, her expression shifted from worry to a stark, deathly white, which then hardened into a sheet of ice. She yanked the boy behind her, shielding him as if Jax were a predator about to pounce. "What are you doing here?" she demanded, her voice sharp. Jax stood up, his eyes never leaving the child. "How old is he, Maya? That's none of your business." "I asked you how old he is," Jax roared, his loss of control turning a few heads in the market. Maya tightened her grip on her son's shoulder, her lips trembling, but her gaze was unwavering. "He's 5, and he's my son. From my new life. Don't flatter yourself, Jax." "My new life?" Jax let out a short, bitter laugh, a sound laced with pain. "You left me 5 years ago. Your son is 5 years old. Who do you think you're fooling? He's the spitting image of me. Maya, how long have you been hiding him from me?" "Lots of people look alike. It means nothing," Maya snapped, bending down to scoop Cody into her arms. "Let's go, honey." "Mommy, who is that man?" "He looks like me," Cody asked in his innocent, high-pitched voice, his big eyes full of curiosity as he stared at Jax. The boy's question was a knife twisting in Jax's chest. He took a step forward, reaching for Maya, but she recoiled, her eyes blazing with a hatred he had never seen before. "Listen to me, Jax Blackwood. 5 years ago, I signed those papers. We are nothing to each other. This boy's name is Cody Hayes. He is my son and mine alone. You are about to get married, to start your perfect, glamorous life in New York. Don't you dare come back here and disrupt our lives." Jax stood frozen in the middle of the market as Maya's retreating figure grew smaller, disappearing behind the bustling stalls. He felt like he couldn't breathe. 5 years old, exactly 5 years since the day she left. He remembered the night before she disappeared. It had been raining hard. He'd come home late, drunk, and bitter about his failing business. Maya had been waiting up for him, her eyes shining with some kind of news, but he had brushed her off, yelling at her about the poverty that was suffocating them both. The next day, she was gone, and he had always believed she left for money. Jax lit a cigarette, the acrid smoke stinging his eyes. He pulled out his phone and called Kenji again. "Kenji, change of plans. I don't just want to know how she lives. I want a DNA test, by any means necessary. Get me a hair sample, anything," from the boy. "Jax, are you insane? You're getting married in 2 weeks." "I'm not insane. I just saw him. Kenji, he's my son." "I am 100% sure of it." Tiffany Vanderbilt stood before a floor-to-ceiling window in the presidential suite of the finest hotel within a 50-mile radius of Hollow Creek. She applied a slash of crimson Tom Ford lipstick, her movements precise and sharp. The reflection staring back at her was a masterpiece of expensive cosmetics and the unshakable self-assurance of old money. But her eyes, beneath the perfectly sculpted brows, were simmering with a venomous rage. Clack! She slammed the lipstick tube down on the marble vanity, the sound echoing in the opulent silence. Jax had vanished since dawn. No note, no call. He had abandoned her, the wedding preparations, their entire future, for that provincial ghost. "That goddamn woman," Tiffany hissed through clenched teeth. She knew exactly where he had gone. Back to that filthy, dirt-poor town, back to Maya Hayes. She snatched her phone and dialed a private number. On the other end, the voice of her mother, Eleanor Vanderbilt, was as cool and smooth as polished granite. "Mother," he went back to that town again. He saw her, and he saw the boy. There was a brief pause. "Calm down, Tiffany," Eleanor's voice commanded, devoid of any real warmth. "This wedding is not a high school romance. It is a merger between 2 dynasties. Jackson Blackwood is a man who understands leverage and debt. He wouldn't dare walk away from us. But he's doubting everything. He's asking questions about the $50,000 from 5 years ago. You don't understand, Mother. The way he looked at her in the hospital, it wasn't hatred. It was regret." Tiffany's voice rose, cracking the veneer of her composure. "So?" Eleanor's voice was dismissive. "Carol Blackwood took our money. She won't dare open her mouth. As for that Maya woman, if she chose silence 5 years ago to save him, she'll choose it again. She's weak. Now, listen to me. Go to the hospital. Have a little chat with Carol. Remind her of her obligations. Delicately. Tiffany hung up the phone. She changed out of her silk dressing gown and into a discreet but undeniably expensive sheath dress, sliding on oversized sunglasses that hid half her face. She wasn't going back to the village. She was going back to the hospital. The corridor of the medical ward was quiet. Tiffany's heels clicked on the linoleum, a sharp, rhythmic sound like a countdown timer. She pushed open the door to Carol's room without knocking. The old woman was sitting up in bed, looking frail and lost. Seeing Tiffany, she flinched, a flicker of fear in her tired eyes. "Tiffany, dear, you came. Where's Jax?" "Jax is busy chasing ghosts, Carol," Tiffany said, pulling a plastic chair to the bedside. She didn't remove her sunglasses, her attitude a study in calculated arrogance. "I heard you were thinking of telling him something." Carol's hands began to tremble, her fingers picking nervously at the edge of the blanket. I just feel so guilty about Maya. And Cody, he's my grandson. I can't let him live his life as a bastard." Tiffany let out a laugh, a tinkling, brittle sound that held no humor. She leaned in close, her voice a venomous whisper. "Have you forgotten, Carol? 5 years ago, without my family's money, your precious son would be rotting in a federal prison for bankruptcy fraud, not sitting on the board of a billion-dollar corporation. Do you think you're some kind of saint? You're the one who knelt on the floor and begged that girl to sign the divorce papers. You're the one who planted the story about her stealing from you. You're more of a villain in this story than I am." "I did it for Jax," Carol whimpered, tears streaming down her wrinkled face. "Precisely. So for his sake, you will keep your mouth shut until the day you die," Tiffany said, standing up. She casually took a silk handkerchief from her purse and dabbed at Carol's tear-streaked face, a gesture of mock tenderness that was colder than any threat. "If this wedding falls through, my family pulls its funding. Blackwood Holdings will collapse overnight. And then you, that Maya woman, and that little brat can all starve together. Don't you dare try to act noble now. It's nauseating." Carol bowed her head, her sobs muffled by the thin hospital pillow. Tiffany looked down at the broken old woman with utter contempt. To her, everyone here from Carol to Maya was a lower life form, a pawn on the chessboard of her own glorious future. Tiffany swept out of the room and nearly collided with Maya in the hallway. Maya had just come from visiting hours, still in her simple preschool teacher's dress, carrying an insulated lunch bag. The two women stood face to face, one shimmering with diamonds and couture, the other grounded in simple, worn cotton. The air between them crackled. Tiffany's lip curled into a sneer as she raked her eyes over Maya. "Playing the part of the devoted caregiver, are we? Carrying the old woman. Bringing her soup. Tell me, what's the price for this little performance? Name it. I'll double it. Then you can take your brat and disappear from our lives for good." Maya looked at Tiffany, and there wasn't a flicker of fear in her eyes. 5 years of hardship had forged her into something unbreakable. She set the lunch bag down on a nearby chair, her voice steady. "Are you that insecure about your position as the future Mrs. Blackwood that you've resorted to paranoid fantasies? I'm taking care of Carol out of love and respect, not for money. The things you value are worthless to me." "Worthless?" Tiffany took a step closer, her voice a hiss. "What right do you have to say that? A woman who was thrown out of his life like trash, a woman with a bastard son. Do you honestly think Jax would ever take you back? Look at yourself. You are nothing but a stain on his past." Crack. The sound of the slap was sharp and loud in the quiet hallway. Maya pulled her hand back, her eyes blazing. "You can insult me all you want, but you will never, ever talk about my son that way." Tiffany stood, frozen, her hand flying to her cheek, her face a mask of shock and humiliation. No one had ever dared to touch her, especially not some backwoods nobody. You hit me," she stammered, shaking with rage. She lunged forward, but Maya simply stepped aside, picking up the lunch bag. "Get out of my way," Maya said, her voice cold as ice. "Don't let your cheap perfume ruin my mother's soup." Maya walked into the hospital room, closing the door firmly behind her. Tiffany stood alone in the hallway, her hand clenched so tightly her manicured nails dug into her palm, drawing blood. Her pride was in tatters. The threat Maya posed was no longer a vague anxiety, it was real and immediate. She pulled out her phone and dialed a number, not in her regular contacts. "Hello, is this Mr. Sterling? I have a job for you. I want you to make a woman named Maya Hayes disappear, not physically. I want you to destroy her reputation so completely that she won't be able to show her face in public again. Money is no object." She began to laugh, a silent, vicious laugh that shook her entire body. If she couldn't buy Maya off, she would bury her. That was how the Vanderbilts had always operated. It was how they'd clawed their way to the top. Inside the hospital room, Maya sat beside Carol, noticing the old woman's tears. Maya didn't ask. She just quietly opened the lunch bag, the warm, comforting scent of chicken soup filling the air. She knew Tiffany had been there, and she knew this war was just beginning. It was no longer a fight for Jax. It was a fight for her honor and for the future of her son, Cody. The next morning, the internet exploded. A grainy, covertly filmed video, shaky and out of focus, was uploaded to a network of gossip blogs. Within an hour, amplified by the Vanderbilt media machine, it was everywhere. The headline was a masterpiece of character assassination. Gold digger, ex-wife of tech billionaire Jax Blackwood demands $10 million to sell son and disappear. In the clip, the audio had been expertly manipulated. All the world heard was Tiffany's seemingly reasonable voice offering help, followed by Maya's voice, sharp and cold. $10 million. To make me and the boy disappear. The edit was seamless, brutal, and utterly convincing. Below the video, a firestorm of comments erupted. Thousands of them, pouring in from every corner of the country. What kind of monster uses her own child as a bargaining chip? Look at her face. You can see the greed. Poor Mr. Blackwood dodged a bullet with that one. Someone should call Child Protective Services on this witch. The digital inferno didn't stay confined to the servers in Silicon Valley. It swept through the fiber optic cables and cellular towers, reaching the quiet, green hills of Hollow Creek faster than a summer storm. When Maya walked Cody to his preschool that morning, she felt the change immediately. The air was thick with it. Parents who usually greeted her with a warm, "Good morning, miss," Hayes now averted their eyes, whispering behind their hands. One mother physically pulled her child away as Maya passed, muttering just loud enough to be heard, "Stay away from them. You don't know what you'll catch." Maya froze, her heart pounding a frantic, confused rhythm against her ribs. But she kept her hand firmly on Cody's small shoulder and walked on. "Mommy, why isn't Mrs. Gable talking to us?" Cody asked, his small face scrunched in confusion. Before Maya could answer, the school's principal, a woman who had always been kind to her, stepped out onto the porch, her expression a mixture of pity and cold resolve. "Maya, could I see you in my office for a moment?" In the cramped, cluttered office that smelled of old paper and chalk dust, the principal slid her phone across the desk. The video was playing on a loop. Her voice was low. "The parents are in an uproar. The school board has been calling me all morning. They're saying they can't have someone with questionable morals teaching their children. I know you're in a tough spot, Maya, but this is reflecting badly on the entire school. I'm going to have to ask you to take a leave of absence, effective immediately, until this whole thing blows over." Maya stared at the screen, at the distorted version of herself being vilified by strangers. She didn't cry. She didn't plead. To argue with people who had already passed judgment was the most useless act in the world. "That's not what happened," she said, her voice hollow. The video was edited. "I don't care if it was edited by Steven Spielberg himself," the principal sighed, rubbing her temples. "I care about the angry mob of parents threatening to pull their funding. I'm sorry, Maya. My hands are tied." Maya stood up. She didn't say goodbye. She walked out of the office and found Cody waiting for her under the big oak tree in the schoolyard. He saw her and ran toward her. But before he could reach her, a group of older kids from the kindergarten class ran past. The biggest one shoved Cody lightly. "Bastard!" he yelled. "Your mommy's selling you for money. For sale! For sale! Little bastard for sale!" Cody froze, his happy expression crumbling, his big dark eyes filled with water. He ran into Maya's arms, his small body racked with sobs. "Mommy, what did they say? You're not selling me, are you, Mommy? Mommy." Maya's heart shattered into a million pieces. She knelt on the cracked pavement of the schoolyard, pulling her son into a fierce, protective embrace. All the hardship of the past 5 years had never broken her, but the look of pure terror and confusion on her child's face ripped through her defenses like paper. Hot tears streamed down her face, soaking the shoulder of Cody's little t-shirt. "No, baby, never. Mommy would never sell you. We're going home." She scooped him up and walked away from the school, her back straight, her head held high, even as her legs trembled with rage and despair. The whispers and stares followed her all the way down the lane, a gauntlet of silent condemnation. Back at their small, rented house, Cody was inconsolable. He refused to eat, refused to play. He just lay on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, shivering despite the afternoon heat. By late afternoon, his skin felt hot to the touch. A fever was setting in. By evening, it had spiked dangerously. Then, it happened. He was sitting up, trying to take a sip of water, when his eyes rolled back in his head. His small body went rigid, and he began to convulse violently. A terrifying, guttural sound escaped his lips. "A febrile seizure," Maya screamed. She snatched him up, his little body shaking uncontrollably in her arms, and ran out the door, her car keys fumbling in her trembling hand. She drove like a madwoman, flying down the dark country roads. Her world narrowed to the horrifying sight of her son, limp and unconscious, his breathing shallow and ragged. She burst through the emergency room doors of the county hospital, screaming for help. "Please, somebody help my son. He's not breathing." A team of nurses rushed toward her with a gurney, and at that exact moment, a black Rolls-Royce screeched to a halt at the curb. Jax leaped out. He had seen the video, the monstrous lie, and had driven from Nashville in a blind panic. He arrived just in time to see Maya, her face a deathly mask of terror, following the gurney as they rushed his son, his unconscious, fragile son, through the swinging doors of the emergency room, his life hanging by the thinnest of threads. The hospital's emergency room became the stage for the story's climax. The air was a cacophony of beeping machines and urgent, clipped voices. Jax stood frozen outside the trauma room, a helpless observer staring through the small glass window at the frantic efforts to save his son. Maya was slumped against the opposite wall, her body having finally given out, her face buried in her hands in a posture of silent, unbearable prayer. Time stretched and warped. Minutes felt like hours. Finally, the same middle-aged doctor from before burst through the doors, his face grim. He strode directly to them, his expression leaving no room for false hope. His fever broke the seizure, but it also triggered a crisis. He's in septic shock and experiencing internal bleeding. We need to stabilize him with a blood transfusion. Now. Then do it. Whatever it costs, do it, Jax commanded, his voice raw. The doctor shook his head, his eyes filled with a weary frustration. "It's not about cost, Mr. Blackwood. It's about supply. Your son has an extremely rare blood type AB negative with a specific KEL antigen deficiency. It's one of the rarest on Earth. Our blood bank doesn't have it. No rural hospital would. We've put out an emergency call to Nashville, but it could take hours, and frankly, he doesn't have hours." The words hit Maya like a physical blow. A choked, guttural sound of pure despair escaped her lips. She slid down the wall, her strength completely gone. This was it, the final, cruelest twist of fate. Her son had survived 5 years of poverty and shame, only to die because his blood was too unique for this world. Jax looked at her crumpled form, then at the doctor, a desperate, wild idea igniting in his mind. "Test me," he said, his voice a low growl. The doctor looked at him, confused. "Mr. Blackwood, the odds of you being a match are astronomical." "I don't give a damn about the odds. He looks exactly like me. He's 5 years old. Just test my blood now," Jax roared, grabbing the doctor's arm. He was no longer a CEO giving an order. He was a father pleading for his son's life. Seeing the raw certainty in his eyes, the doctor nodded curtly to a nurse. "Prep him. Stat." Jax was led into a small curtained-off area. A nurse efficiently drew his blood. As the dark red fluid filled the vial, he could hear Maya's muffled sobs from the hallway. He had failed to be there when she brought their son into the world, alone and afraid. Now, he was here. And this simple act of giving blood felt like the most important transaction of his entire life, a desperate, biological plea for a second chance. The minutes that followed were the longest of his life. Finally, the doctor returned, a look of utter astonishment on his face. He was holding 2 lab reports, looking from one to the other as if they were magic scrolls. I don't believe it," he stammered, looking at Jax. "It's a perfect match. Not just the type, not just the Kell factor. Every single antigen marker is a 1 in a million match. This isn't just compatible. It's a direct parental genetic lock. There is a 0% chance that this boy is not your biological son." Jax let out a short, harsh laugh that sounded more like a sob. The truth, which he had felt in his bones, was now a cold, undeniable scientific fact. He was a father, and his son was dying. "Then take my blood," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Take as much as you need." He was quickly hooked up to a machine, the life-giving fluid flowing from his arm, through a tube, and into a sterile bag. Through the glass, he watched as they rushed his blood into the trauma room. He was literally pouring his life into his son. Just then, the sound of clicking heels and imperious voices shattered the tense silence. Tiffany and her mother, Eleanor, swept into the waiting area, their faces thunderous masks of fury. "Jackson, what is the meaning of this? Our phones have been ringing off the hook." Jax Blackwood cancels wedding. "Do you have any idea what you've done to the stock price? To our family's reputation?" Tiffany shrieked, her voice echoing in the quiet hall. Jax slowly disconnected himself from the IV stand, his eyes blazing with a cold fire she had never seen before. He walked toward them, a predator stalking his prey. "Get out," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. Eleanor Vanderbilt stepped forward, her expression disdainful. "Don't be ridiculous, Jackson. You will fix this mess. You will not throw away a billion-dollar merger for a piece of trailer trash and her bastard." "I said, get out," Jax snarled, his voice rising to a roar. "Get out of this hospital before I use the very blood I just gave my son to swear an oath that I will burn your entire empire to the ground." Tiffany flinched, a flicker of fear in her eyes. "You wouldn't dare." "Try me," he whispered, his face inches from hers. "You came into my life with lies. You tried to destroy an innocent woman with lies, and you nearly killed my son with your lies. This isn't a merger anymore. It's a demolition." He turned to the bewildered security guard at the end of the hall. "These women are trespassing. Escort them out. Now." As the sputtering, humiliated Vanderbilts were led away, Jax's phone buzzed in his pocket. It was Kenji. Jax answered, his eyes still locked on the door to his son's room. "Jax, I have it," Kenji said, his voice grim. "It's worse than we thought. I found the bank. A small credit union 2 towns over. I have a copy of the withdrawal slip for $50,000 in U.S. savings bonds. It was cashed 5 years ago, on the same day Maya left. The signature on the form isn't Maya Hayes. It's Carol Blackwood, your mother." Jax felt the floor drop out from under him. "And that's not all," Kenji continued, his voice heavy. "The day after she left, your company, which was about to go under, received a $5 million anonymous investment that saved it. I traced the wire transfer. It came from a shell corporation in the Cayman Islands. A shell corporation owned and controlled by Vanderbilt Capital." Jax lowered the phone, his hand trembling. He looked through the glass at the small, fragile body of his son, lying in a hospital bed, alive because of his blood. The entire foundation of his life, his success, his hatred, his ambition, was built on a single, monstrous lie. The war wasn't just coming, it was already here, and he was about to burn their world to the ground. Armed with the devastating truth, Jax moved with the cold, precise fury of a man who had nothing left to lose. He didn't drive back to Nashville. He drove to the small, run-down motel where his mother was staying, a place chosen for its proximity to the hospital and its anonymity. He found her in a dim, musty room, sitting on the edge of a sagging bed, twisting a rosary in her trembling hands. The bank slip and a printed copy of the Vanderbilt wire transfer lay on the nightstand. She looked up as he entered, her eyes wide with a guilt so profound it seemed to have aged her a decade in a single day. She already knew. The news of Cody's near death, of Jax's perfect blood match, had been the final, crushing weight on her conscience. "Mom," Jax said, his voice devoid of heat, a flat, dead calm that was more terrifying than any rage. "Tell me everything, from the beginning." And she did. Through a torrent of tears and choked sobs, the entire 5-year conspiracy unraveled. She told him how Eleanor Vanderbilt had approached her, not as a savior, but as a predator, sensing weakness. The deal was simple. The Vanderbilts would clear Jax's debts and fund his company's future, but only if he married Tiffany. When Jax refused to leave Maya, Eleanor had proposed a crueler, more permanent solution. Carol, terrified of seeing her son go to prison, had agreed. She confessed to cashing the bonds herself, to begging Maya on her knees, weaving a tale of impending financial ruin and jail time for Jax if she didn't leave. She told Jax how Maya, believing she was saving the man she loved, had signed the papers, refused the money, and walked away with nothing but the clothes on her back and a secret in her womb. "She told me she was pregnant, Jax," Carol whispered, her voice a ragged breath. "She told me, and I made her promise never to tell you. I was afraid you'd never leave her if you knew. I thought I was giving you a future." Jax stood there, listening to the confession, and felt nothing. The anger had burned out, leaving only a vast, hollow emptiness. His entire life, his spectacular rise, was a monument built on the wreckage of the woman he loved and the life of the son he never knew. He turned and walked out of the motel room without another word, leaving his mother to drown in the ruin she had created. His next move was decisive. He didn't leak the story to the press. He convened an emergency press conference at the gleaming headquarters of Blackwood Holdings in Nashville. The room was packed. Wall Street analysts, tech journalists, and gossip columnists all crammed together, sensing blood in the water. Tiffany and Eleanor Vanderbilt were there, seated in the front row, their lawyers flanking them like statues. They believed they were there to witness Jax perform a humiliating act of public relations damage control. They were wrong. Jax strode to the podium, not as a beleaguered CEO, but as a man on a mission of absolute destruction. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice ringing with cold authority. "For the past 5 years, my success has been attributed to my drive and my ambition. That is a lie. My success was built on the calculated betrayal of an innocent woman and the hidden existence of my own son." A collective gasp went through the room. On the massive screen behind him, the unedited audio recording of Tiffany's confrontation with Maya began to play. The entire damning conversation filled the hall, exposing Tiffany's cruel threats and Maya's dignified refusal. Next, a high-resolution image of the bank withdrawal slip, signed by Carol Blackwood, flashed on the screen, followed by the intricate web of wire transfers linking Vanderbilt Capital to his company's salvation. "For 5 years," Jax continued, his voice cracking with emotion for the first time, "Miss Maya Hayes has lived in poverty and endured public shame, all while single-handedly raising my son, Cody Hayes Blackwood. She did this in silence, believing she was protecting me. She is not a gold digger. She is a hero, and the architects of her suffering and my ignorance are sitting in this very room." He pointed a trembling finger at Tiffany and Eleanor. The room erupted into chaos. Camera flashes exploded like fireworks. Reporters shouted questions. Tiffany and Eleanor sat frozen, their faces pale, masks of horror as their world publicly imploded. As of this moment, Jax announced over the din, "I am stepping down as CEO of Blackwood Holdings. A full third of my personal shares will be placed in an irrevocable trust for my son, Cody." All evidence pertaining to the Vanderbilt family's fraudulent activities, including conspiracy and market manipulation, has been turned over to the SEC and the District Attorney's Office. He looked directly into the main camera, his eyes finding the lens as if he could see straight through it to the small hospital room in Hollow Creek. "Maya, I am so sorry. This doesn't fix anything, but it's a start." He walked off the stage, leaving the chaos behind him. He didn't look back at the Vanderbilts being swarmed by reporters, their empire crumbling around them. He got into his car and drove, Not to his penthouse, but back to the county hospital, back to the only two people in the world who mattered. He found Maya in Cody's room. The television was on, broadcasting the aftermath of his press conference. Cody was asleep, his breathing steady and peaceful. Maya was sitting by the window, tears streaming silently down her face. 5 years of pain, of injustice, of loneliness were finally being washed away. The door creaked open. Jax stood there, stripped of his corporate armor, his expensive suit looking wrinkled and out of place. He wasn't a billionaire anymore. He was just a man, broken and filled with a regret so vast it threatened to consume him. He didn't speak. He just walked to the side of the bed, looked down at the face of his sleeping son, and then turned to Maya. He slowly knelt before her, not in a grand gesture, but in a simple act of complete and total surrender. He had paid his debt to the world. Now began the impossible task of atoning to her. The fallout was biblical. The Vanderbilt empire, a titan of old money and ruthless acquisitions, didn't just stumble, it disintegrated. Faced with a mountain of irrefutable evidence and a public baying for blood, their stock plummeted into oblivion. Tiffany and Eleanor Vanderbilt, stripped of their power and prestige, were indicted on multiple charges. Their perp walk in sensible shoes, a pathetic final act in a tragedy of their own making. The gleaming towers of Nashville no longer held any appeal for Jax. True to his word, he stepped down as CEO of Blackwood Holdings, handing the reins over to Kenji and a trusted board. He sold his cavernous penthouse, liquidated his portfolio of supercars, and quietly, without fanfare, moved back to Hollow Creek. He didn't move in with Maya. He knew that was a boundary he had no right to cross. Instead, he bought the small, neglected farmhouse at the end of her lane, the one they used to dream of fixing up together during long summer walks, back when their biggest asset was hope. The first few months were a study in quiet, painstaking reconstruction. The silence between him and Maya was no longer thick with anger, but with the fragile, awkward caution of two people learning to navigate a minefield of shared trauma. He didn't push. He didn't make grand gestures. He simply showed up. He fixed the perpetually squeaky gate on her fence. He taught Cody how to properly bait a hook and cast a line into the muddy creek behind their houses. He sat on her porch steps, a respectful distance away, and learned the rhythm of the life he had been absent from. Carol, frail and humbled, found her own quiet path to atonement. She moved into a small apartment in town and spent her days in service to the family she had nearly destroyed. She would arrive in the mornings with freshly baked bread, mend Cody's torn jeans with a skill born of a simpler time, and watch her grandson play, her eyes filled with a mixture of love and a sorrow so deep it was bottomless. She and Maya rarely spoke of the past, but an unspoken understanding grew between them, forged in the shared love for the little boy who was the living, breathing embodiment of their second chance. The healing came not in a flood, but in drops. It came one afternoon when Cody skinned his knee, and instead of just calling for his mom, he ran to Jax, trusting his father to clean the wound and make it better. It came one evening when Maya brought over a slice of apple pie for Jax, setting it on his porch railing and staying, for the first time, to watch the sunset with him. They didn't talk much, but in the comfortable silence, a single, fragile thread of connection was rewoven. One cool autumn evening, months later, Jax was sitting on his porch, whittling a small wooden bird for Cody. The boy was asleep inside, tired out from a day of chasing leaves. The warm glow from Maya's kitchen window spilled across the yard. The door opened, and she walked across the grass, holding 2 steaming mugs. She handed one to him. It was hot apple cider. She sat down on the step below him, close enough that he could feel the warmth from her shoulder. "He asked about you today," she said softly, her voice carrying on the crisp night air. "He wanted to know if billionaire was like being a king, and if you were still a king." Jax stopped whittling. He looked down at the rough piece of wood in his hands, then at her. "What did you tell him?" "I told him you gave up your castle to come home and be his dad," she replied, her gaze fixed on the stars beginning to prick the dark velvet of the sky. "I told him that makes you richer than any king." Jax's throat grew tight. He set the bird down and gently took her hand. It was calloused and strong, the hand of a woman who had carried the world. This time, she didn't pull away. Her fingers curled around his. The storms had passed. The scars remained, a permanent roadmap of their painful journey, but they no longer ached with the fire of betrayal. They were just a part of their story. In the quiet darkness of the Tennessee hills, surrounded by the chirping of crickets and the scent of wood smoke, Jackson Blackwood, the man who had conquered the world, finally found what he had been searching for all along. It wasn't in the roar of the stock market or the reflection in a skyscraper window. It was here, in the gentle pressure of her hand in his, in the steady breathing of his son sleeping soundly just a few feet away. It was a new kind of fortune, one not measured in dollars, but in the profound, quiet peace of being truly, finally, home.